my brother from another mother, a spiritual mentor, a business mentor, one of the smartest people I know, someone who I would call a top 1%er, not from a competitive standpoint, but from how he thinks. I have Ryan Blair. For those who don't know who he is, he's a best-selling author, uber successful entrepreneur, uber successful investor. But this whole conversation is about his journey, what he's now doing, and specifically his own habits and rituals. So, brother, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, my brother. Happy New Year to you, my friend. And I look forward to spending many more days with you in the year 2020 and beyond.
Thank you. So what are you now doing?
What am I now doing? Well, tonight I'm actually writing a book,
Nice.
my third book. And I decided I was going to take time off. After I had my son on Christmas. And then after that, I just put my head down writing. And so what am I physically doing? I'm writing a book right now. I just took some time out from writing. And then I'm going to celebrate New Year's just by doing a stream of conscious journaling, writing, and hopefully completing. I don't want to say completing, but getting the manuscript to a point where, I'm ready to start the editing process.
Okay. And aside from the book,
yeah.
This cool new series, would you call it a mastermind, a program? Talk us through that, please.
Well, so I started a movement around helping people change called Alter Call. My book is also called Alter Call. That's ALTERCALL, as an alter, a call to change.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been moving quite well. We do transformational experiences. We're actually hosting them out of my home in the Hollywood Hills. And they're for a select group of people that are entrepreneurs and they're, looking to elevate their mind, their body, and their spirit together along with their business. And what I teach in those experiences is I teach the principles I've learned in building and scaling businesses, that have done hundreds of millions in sales and exits. And I teach a lot of the things that I wish I would have known 10 years ago. Like, this is now my 20th, I'm going on my third decade. So I started my career as an entrepreneur in October of 1999, selling Y2K services. And so, it was a company called 24/7 Tech. And then in 2010, my business Visalis was right about to go under. And by 2012, I had a $600 million a year. It's like $635 million a year in sales. And I sold it in 2012 for $792 million. So as I've closed this decade, I've been reflecting a lot on the past 2 decades, but certainly this last one. And it's been, quite an amazing journey.
Okay. Where did the name Alter Call come from?
It's one of those things that I was with a friend and we were talking about just domain names. And I said, look up Alter Call. It just came to me. So I really I looked it up and I saw that it was available and I reserved it. It was several years ago. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And then as I started going through a tremendous amount of change, I think a lot of people, it's weird. 2020 was preparing a lot of us. A lot of us went through transformational change, albeit by way of, difficult losses. I had lost a number of relatives, including my mother and father, in the last decade. Some people went through career trauma, divorces, breakups, but I'm seeing a massive trend of people that have been prepared for this year 2020. And so I have no doubt when I reserved the domain in 2016 that, I would be later using it. And I just started Alter Call in October 17th of this year. And so it's fascinating that I'm kicking off the next decade with a brand new venture. And it's been exciting to get back to my entrepreneurial roots and start to really build a business again. It's been a while because, I built and scaled Visalis and then I sold it. And so I had quite a lot of time to take off and reflect and do a lot of the healing and deep work that I've been able to do. And now I teach that work.
So you kind of remind me of Michael Jordan. And let me tell you why. So if you study Michael
Jordan. By the way, I love that comparison. Keep going.
So like Michael Jordan, he won. And then he had a setback. His father passing away. Yeah. He decided to do baseball. But then when he decided to go back into basketball, he did a lot of prep work. And then he had that whole Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, they just crushed it. They just won a bunch of championships. And I feel that, and I'm not trying to be don't take this more than just an example. I feel that you had a certain similar situation where you had some setbacks. you decided to go all in on working on yourself. And now
Yeah.
you're going strong with Alter Call, working on your third book. I mean, if anyone who sees your social posts, you have this radiance about you. I remember when I saw you last, you showed me this throat thing that you do, the you know, that the throat chakra thing. And so you're in it. You're woke, as they would call. What I like about this situation is that you did a lot of prep work before you decided to do Alter Call. So my question for you and for others is, what is the rituals or habits that you now do on a daily basis?
Yeah, one, I'll share with you the most important thing that I've learned is there are really two forces in this universe that you can harness. One is the force of restriction, and then the other is the force of sharing. And so I spent a lot of time over the past 2 years learning and mastering restriction. Now, what do I mean by restriction? Restricting from negative thinking, restricting from egocentric thinking, restricting from foods that we all know that we should restrict from. And many people watching this have a long list of things that they're planning on restricting from, right? So, once you learn how to master this force of restriction, it builds up resilience in you. For example, just recently I stopped eating meat, not because I was, called to it from a spiritual standpoint, but because I wanted to see if I could restrict eating something that I'd eaten every single day of my life. And then I wanted to see how it felt and how it, made me feel from a health standpoint. And because I exercised that force of restriction, I then did feel the benefits of the health from it. I did benefit from it health-wise. And I was able to restrict from eating meat. I've restricted from substances like alcohol. I've restricted from substances like sugar. I've restricted from more than just alcohol, drugs, alcohol, sugar, refined processed foods. And so the force of restriction, right? So if we really think about that, what are we committed to restricting? And then sharing. If we restrict the right things, we're able to share. So if I restrict the negative substances that cause and waste my energy, then I'm able to share my energy more, as you said, with more radiance, so to speak. So restriction and sharing is really what I focus on. And my rituals are around that. So I spend a lot of time writing, journaling. I spend a lot of time meditating. I'm constantly taking walks in nature. I'm constantly getting outdoors and just observing. And that's a form of restriction because, I could be on Instagram. I could be talking to friends, doing work, working on business, watching Netflix, right? But getting out there and saying, no, I'm going to restrict from all these other activities. And I'm going to get out there and I'm going to connect with nature for 2-3 hours and just do thinking, for example. That's a form of restriction. So what I like to do is just simplify everything. Life is about restriction and sharing. And if you can restrict the desire for self and you can share with pure intention, you can really share a lot of light and activate a lot of people in the process. Okay.
You write a lot. What does writing do for you?
Writing is therapy. Okay. Yeah, no, I think a lot and then I write down a lot of the things that I think about. But the physical aspect of writing is you're taking your energy, your thoughts out of your mind, and you're actually putting it on a piece of paper. And when you do that, you're releasing something into the universe. You're putting that thought and you're turning it into a thing. And so writing is a very important part of the human process that most people just don't do enough of. So I highly recommend it. I recommend journaling, not just typing and not just notes, but actually, inscribing and writing and actually exercising your hand and there's neurology to support that as a process of thinking and writing, you're actually, getting energy out of you and you're able to then replenish your energy more effectively.
Okay. What about, let's talk about your sleep patterns or exercise, those aspects. We talked a little earlier, but what do you do?
Well, I sleep like a baby. I used to require Ambient and all kinds of sleeping related medications, and I have no challenges sleeping whatsoever. I love my sleep. I wake up super early as a habit. I like to wake up, at 5 a.m. This morning I was up at 4:30 a.m. And I eat right. I drink at least a gallon of water a day. I exercise every single day. Generally, I'll do a hike and I'll do some gym time as well. And I like to practice martial arts and, boxing and things like that that are, fun, precision. And I can get into a flow state in those exercises. When you're just, moving weights for the sake of moving weights, you rarely get yourself into a flow state. But when you're playing basketball or doing martial arts or hiking a challenging trail, you'll find yourself more in a flow state. So I like to do exercises that put me into a flow state.
Okay. Well, my last question, I want you to get into your flow state of writing, no pun intended.
Yeah.
What, as we're nearing 2020, or for some it is right about 2020, what is your parting wisdom for anyone?
Well, one, go back and reflect on the last decade. So, I have now 2 decades underneath my belt at midnight tonight, and the time goes very fast. I can tell you, though, having 2 behind me, that I have some pretty solid vision and knowledge about what the next decade will look like. We'll likely go through a recession in the next decade. And I've weathered the 2008 recession, and I know what that experience was like. And so I built tools and strengths for that. So I recommend you go back through your last decade and you close it. Go through all your Instagram posts or Facebook posts, archive, delete, and then save the ones that you want to remember, and just close that decade and don't look back. And then open up 2020 clean and clear and focused on what your objectives are and what your goals are for the next 20, for 2020. And then also think about the year 2030. In 2010, I didn't really have a vision for 2020. I just thought, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to work my butt off. And I achieved so much. And I'm so grateful for the decade of 2010 to 2020. But now I'm looking back saying, wow, I could have done so much more and had so many more blessings and had so much more fun if I would have really thought through the entire decade. So I recommend to your audience, think through 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and just put some critical thinking into each year of the decade. And I know that's a lot for some people. And if it is too much, just go to 2030. Okay. And say, where do I want to be in 2030? What relationships do I want to have? Like, I can see my son graduating from college. I can see myself having a amazing kindred spirit with him and connecting with him and being best friends with him as we are today. He's 10 years old now. I can see my life and myself with some more gray hairs, right? I could see myself in 2030 having 2 decades behind me. Thinking through the next decade, my 3rd decade as an entrepreneur, isn't too difficult. And I would say that the reason why I'm telling you to do that, close the last decade, and then really future think through the next decade, because we only have 3, 4, 5, 6 or so decades, right? And so if you treat them as such, you can complete so much in a decade. So we're closing on a decade. I ask you to really think through the next decade and open up 2020 like it's a brand new decade, because you're going to look back at this day, at this time, at this moment in your life in 2030. Guarantee you're going to look back at the beginning of the decade in 2030. You're going to look back and say, what did I do? How did I show up to the beginning of the decade? How committed was I? What would I like to change about my actions heading into the year 2020? You're going to ask that question of yourself in the year 2030 for sure. So you might as well ask that question of yourself today. Okay.
Well, before we end this, where can people find you? What information would you like to share?
You can buy my books on Amazon, Rock Bomb to Rockstar, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, both on Amazon under Ryan Blair. And you can track me on Instagram, Real Ryan Blair at Instagram. And I'd love to connect with you.
All right. Peace and blessings, brother.
All right, brother. God bless. Talk to you soon. See you next weekend.
Yep. See you next weekend.
All right, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.